When I first moved into the cul-de-sac on Maplewood Lane, I wasn't looking for trouble, was chasing peace. After 3 deployments overseas and a medical discharge, my life had shifted from adrenaline and orders to silence and recovery. PTSD wasn't a badge I wore proudly, but it clung to me like smoke after a fire. My lifeline came in the form of Bear, a broad-shouldered, amber-eyed German shepherd with the temperament of a monk and the intuition of a saint. He wasn't just a dog. He was my service companion, trained to ground me during panic attacks, interrupt flashbacks, and lead me away from crowds when the walls started closing in. Bear had saved my life more times than I could count. The HOA neighborhood, with its trimmed hedges and white vinyl fences, promised a fresh start. People waved. Lawns were edged. Driveways gleamed. It all felt normal. That illusion cracked within the first week. She called herself Karen Whitmore, and from the moment I met her, I knew she didn't just live in the neighborhood, she ruled it. Karen was the HOA president, self-appointed enforcer of the community bylaws, and self-declared guardian of aesthetic values. She had the posture of a school principal, the sharp gaze of someone always hunting for violations, and a clipboard that might as well have been surgically attached to her hand. It started innocently enough. I was unloading groceries when she walked briskly across the street, heels clacking like a metronome of judgment. "Excuse me," she said, peering down her nose at Bear. "That's a dog." I blinked. "Yeah, his name is Bear." "I assumed as much," she said, tapping her clipboard. "This is a pet-free HOA. Section 8, subsection B. No domestic animals outside of fish in tanks. I'll need you to remove him within 72 hours. I chuckled softly. A mistake I'd soon learn. He's not a pet. He's my service dog. Registered, certified, and trained. Her lips thinned. You'll need to submit that documentation to the HOA board for approval. That's not how federal law works. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I took a step forward, Bear calmly at my side, under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Service animals are not pets and don't require HOA approval. He's legally permitted to live and accompany me here. Karen's silence was brief but electric. We'll see about that. She turned sharply, heels hammering the concrete as she stormed off, already dialing her phone. Bear looked up at me, ears perked. Yeah, I muttered, I think we just made a friend. The next morning, a bright orange violation notice was taped to my door. Non-compliant animal presence, final warning. It was unsigned, but I didn't need a signature to know whose handiwork it was. I tried to do things the right way. I emailed the HOA, attaching Bear's documentation as ADA registry, training certification, medical recommendation from my VA psychologist. I received no response. Instead, I started receiving daily compliance checks. Karen would walk slowly past my house each morning, and again each evening, phone in hand, snapping photos of Bear sitting beside me on the porch or walking with me down the sidewalk. Neighbors began to glance at me sideways. Conversations hushed when I passed by. One afternoon, I returned home from therapy to find a group of board members standing in my yard with Karen at the center, pointing at my porch and shaking her head like she discovered a meth lab. I walked up, Bear obediently at heel. "What's going on?" "We're documenting a recurring violation." Karen snapped, arms crossed. "He's a service dog. I've sent the paperwork." "It's under review," she said. "But in the meantime, you're subject to fines. Federal law overrides HOA rules." I reminded them, "You can't fine me for having a service animal." Her smile was cold. "That's what lawyers are for, isn't it?" The harassment escalated quickly. By week 3, I'd received 5 formal notices, each more threatening than the last. Karen began slipping them directly into my mailbox and even left one under my windshield wiper while I was parked at the community center. Then came the surveillance. A small camera appeared across the street on a lamppost, pointed directly at my front door. I asked around. No one knew who installed it. But the next day, Karen casually mentioned to a neighbor that she had new security measures to monitor rule breakers. I tried to stay calm. I meditated. I walked Bear on quiet routes. I avoided confrontation. But living in a war zone without gunfire is still a war zone. One night, Around 2 a.m., I woke to Bear growling low by the window. Someone was in the yard. I reached for my flashlight, flicked it on, and saw the glint of a clipboard disappearing behind my fence. The next morning, another violation notice was taped to my door. Unauthorized animal behavior recorded at 1:47 a.m., leash not visible. Final fine issued before escalation. I stared at the paper, heart pounding, and felt something shift in me. A fracture. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was trying to break me. I contacted a legal aid clinic for veterans. The woman who picked up Marissa, sharp voice and quick listen to everything, then said, "You need to document everything. This is more than an HOA issue. It's harassment, and it's illegal." That night, I started a journal. Bear woke me up at 2 a.m. Karen in yard. Trespassing. I set my own camera that pointed at my porch. Karen noticed the next day. Recording the neighborhood is a violation of community policy, she called out from her garden. Good thing I'm not recording the neighborhood. I replied, just protecting my property. She didn't respond, but the next HOA newsletter featured a bolded paragraph about residents engaging in surveillance and how it created an atmosphere of distrust. The irony nearly gave me whiplash. Still, for a moment, things went quiet. The notices stopped. Karen stopped pacing in front of my home. I dared to believe it might be over. Then came the HOA meeting. I hadn't planned to go. Crowded rooms and sharp stares weren't good for me. But Marissa encouraged me. "Your presence matters," she said. "Bullies thrive in silence." So I showed up, Bear at my side, shoulders squared. The room fell silent as I entered. Karen was already speaking, standing before a projector screen. And that brings us to item 9, continued disregard of pet-free policies. The board is considering legal action against non-compliant residents. She turned, eyes locking on mine. "Would you like to say anything before we vote?" I stepped forward, heart hammering. I'm a disabled combat veteran. Bear is a fully trained service dog. You're not just breaking HOA rules. By targeting me, you're breaking federal law. You're discriminating against someone with a disability. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's face flushed. "We're only enforcing community standards. You're enforcing your own prejudice." A silence fell over the room long, heavy. Then someone in the back stood up, an older man with a veteran's cap. "I've lived here 15 years, he said, "and I say let the man keep his damn dog." Others nodded, slowly, one by one. Karen's jaw clenched, but she forced a smile. "Well, that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you for your feedback." Later that night, I found my mailbox ripped off its post. Inside, a handwritten note. "We warned you. Next time, we won't be so subtle." Bear pressed close to my leg, growling. I looked at the shattered wood, the crumpled paper, the quiet houses around me, and Karen made a decision. The shattered mailbox should have been a turning point for the HOA board, a signal that things had gone too far. But instead, it was just the beginning. 3 days after the meeting, I received a certified letter, stamped and sealed with the HOA insignia. The envelope reeked of self-importance. Inside was a formal complaint citing chronic noncompliance, a warning of legal action, and a fine tally that now totaled over $3,000 for having a service dog. Marissa, my legal aid contact, was appalled. "This isn't enforcement," she said flatly. "It's targeted harassment." We began compiling evidence. I forwarded every email, notice, video clip, and Karen encounter I could document. She told me to keep logging everything. Meanwhile, Karen didn't ease up. She shifted tactics. Instead of direct confrontation, she weaponized bureaucracy. A neighbor, Danielle, who had once waved at me every morning, now avoided eye contact. Her husband, Greg, stopped jogging past my driveway. Another neighbor who had admired Bear during our first week started walking her kids on the opposite side of the street. Karen had turned the community against me. A new HOA newsletter came out, bolded and italicized. While we support all residents, we must remind everyone that non-approved animals contribute to property depreciation and community unease. Your cooperation ensures Maplewood remains a peaceful uniform environment. The word non-approved burned a hole in my chest. Bear wasn't just approved. He was legally protected. But Karen twisted words like a snake. Polite enough to seem reasonable, venomous enough to poison perception. Even more insidious were the anonymous calls. Animal control showed up twice in 1 week, claiming they'd received concerns about an aggressive dog on the loose. Each time, Bear sat calmly at my side, leash in place, tail wagging slowly. The officers were apologetic. They left with more sympathy for me than concern, but it was clear I was being targeted from every angle. Then came the drone. I noticed it one afternoon while working in my garden. A low hum buzzed above me. I looked up and saw a black quadcopter hovering overhead, silent, watching. Bear barked once, low and instinctive. I pulled out my phone and filmed it, zooming in on the make and model. Later that day, Marissa confirmed, if it crossed your property line, that's a privacy violation. But HOA guidelines were conveniently vague about aerial surveillance. Karen had likely found yet another gray area to exploit. It wasn't paranoia if it was true, and now, even the sky wasn't safe. A week later, I made the mistake of going to the park. It was a sunny morning. I needed a mental reset, and Bear needed a run. We drove to a nearby public greenbelt, far from the HOA's jurisdiction. I sat on a bench, coffee in hand, Bear lounging at my feet, calm and still. Then my phone buzzed. Private number. You think you can run from the rules? Another buzz followed. A picture. Me and Bear. On the bench. Taken from a distance. The caption. Spotted. Unsafe dog near children. I stared at the screen, fingers tightening. Bear stirred, sensing my mood shift. His gaze locked on me, alert, waiting. They were watching me off property now. Karen had crossed the line from nuisance to stalker. And suddenly, the soft suburban neighborhood felt like an open-air prison. That night, someone poured bleach across my lawn. The grass withered in jagged, winding lines, spelling out a crude, "N.O. dogs." It wasn't subtle. I called the police, filed a report, but without a camera on the side yard, there wasn't much to pursue. You should really consider moving, the officer muttered as he filled out the paperwork. I almost laughed. That's what Karen wanted. That's what this whole campaign was about. Not compliance exile. The next HOA board meeting was circus. I showed up with Marissa on video call via laptop. Seated beside me, Karen wore a power suit and a tight smile, flanked by 2 board members I hadn't seen before. She cleared her throat theatrically. Let the record reflect that this meeting is to address continued non-compliance of resident at 214 Maplewood Lane regarding unapproved animal presence. I raised my hand. Let the record also reflect that the animal in question is a federally protected service dog. Karen's eyes flickered, but she continued, pretending not to hear. We've received multiple reports of community distress, property damage, and safety concerns. Marissa's voice piped through the speaker. Are you implying the service dog is responsible for property damage? Because if so, we'll need documentation, police reports, photographic evidence. Karen faltered. One of the board members coughed. We're not accusing, she amended, just observing a pattern. Marissa pressed on. I've reviewed your HOA charter. Nowhere does it override ADA compliance. Any attempt to remove a service animal, fine its owner, or interfere with their accommodation is not only unlawful, it's a federal offense. Karen's jaw visibly clenched. We are simply enforcing uniformity and order. Our goal is community harmony. Marissa's voice went cold. Your goal is coercion, and we're keeping records. Karen turned to the room. I motioned for a board vote to begin formal proceedings of eviction for persistent rule violation. No, I said loudly, standing. I motion that this board stop hiding behind community values and start answering for harassment. A neighbor in the back murmured, he's right. Another leaned forward. Wait, they're trying to evict a veteran over a service dog. Karen's face twisted, and for the first time, I saw fear, because the narrative was slipping. The next morning, Bear refused to eat. He drank water, but turned his head from food. He was sluggish, slower than usual. I didn't panic immediately, Maybe it was heat, stress, overwork. But by afternoon, he was vomiting. I rushed him to the vet. Blood work. Scans. They found traces of xylitol, a sugar substitute extremely toxic to dogs. My stomach dropped. The vet asked if Bear could have gotten into anything sweet. Gum? Candy? Nothing. He was always with me, always under supervision, unless someone fed it to him. Marissa called that evening. I told her everything. She went silent for a moment. Then, this isn't harassment anymore. This is criminal. Attempted harm of a service animal falls under federal protection laws. I'm calling it DOJ contact. That night, I sat on the porch, Bear beside me, wrapped in blankets. He was stable, recovering. But something inside me had crystallized. Karen had stopped playing by rules. Now I wouldn't either. I submitted everything. The notices, the photos, the threats, the surveillance, the vet report, the poison food, even the drone footage. Marissa submitted a complaint directly to the U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. The response was swift. An official letter was issued to the HOA. Immediate cessation of all discriminatory actions against resident and his service animal under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Karen received a personal warning, a formal notice that any further action could result in federal charges. The board went quiet. No more newsletters. No more violation slips. No more Karen pacing outside my window. For a week, it was as if she had vanished. Until one morning, just before dawn, I heard a sharp knock. I opened the door to find Bear's service vest, ripped in half, nailed to my porch railing. There was no note, but I need one. The morning after Bear's vest was nailed to the railing, I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I just stared. Bear sat beside me, heel but wary, eyes flicking between the torn fabric of my face, as if waiting for a command. But no command came, only a slow, measured breath. Karen had declared herself untouchable, and in doing so, she gave me everything I needed. This wasn't about HOA violations anymore. This was a personal vendetta, a campaign of terror disguised as neighborhood policy. And now, she had vandalized federally protected medical equipment. That changed everything. I contacted Marissa, told her everything. Again, she didn't respond with legalese this time. She responded with fury. She tampered with a service vest? That's destruction of federal medical property. I'm calling in the ADA task force. This isn't just a DOJ matter anymore, it's criminal. I heard typing in the background. This ends now. By the end of the day, the Department of Justice had forwarded the complaint to federal investigators. I received a call from a calm but serious woman named Agent Kelsey Navarro, assigned to Civil Rights Enforcement. She wasn't warm. She was clinical, but that was exactly what I needed. She asked for evidence. I gave her everything. Again, this time with a timeline. The notices, the fines, the drone footage, the vandalized lawn, the poison food, the vet bill, the surveillance photo from the park, and now the destroyed vest. Agent Navarro didn't comment. She just said, "Understood, we'll be in contact." But Karen wasn't done yet. She must have sensed the silence wasn't victory. It was pressure building. That week, a special HOA notice was hand-delivered to every resident on the block. It read, "This community is under threat. Disorder has entered our gates. We urge all residents to report suspicious behavior and noncompliance. Unsafe animals and combative individuals should not be tolerated in a peaceful neighborhood." It didn't say my name, but everyone knew who it meant. The next day, someone egged my car. Bear barked in the middle of the night, twice. Security footage showed a masked figure walking past my driveway with something in hand. I submitted it to the police, but they shrugged. No way to prove intent, they said. But I knew, and so did Karen. That weekend, I drove Bear to the VA clinic for a routine checkup. On our way back, I stopped at the gas station 2 blocks from the neighborhood. When I returned to my truck, a piece of paper was tucked under the wiper. "You should have left. Next time, it won't be your dog that gets hurt." I froze. This wasn't veiled anymore. This was a threat. Bear whimpered low in his throat. He felt it too. I filed another police report. Submitted it to Marissa. She sent it to Navarro's office. The walls were closing in, but now the right eyes were finally watching. The next HOA meeting was different. Karen didn't sit at the head of the table. She stood, stiff, rigid, fake smile clinging to her lips like it had been stitched there. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it. "We are here to, reaffirm the community values," she said. "Some outside forces have been misinterpreting our efforts." I raised my hand. "Is vandalism a community value?" She ignored me. Marissa was on a laptop again. This time, she brought someone new, Agent Navarro herself, appearing via secure video. Karen's face lost all color when she saw the badge. Navarro spoke with surgical precision. "We are conducting a federal investigation into alleged violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act by members of this HOA, specifically targeting service animal interference, privacy invasion, intimidation, and retaliatory harassment." You could have heard a pin drop. One of the other board members, Tom, a meek accountant who rarely spoke, actually stood up and left. Karen stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. We were only enforcing compliance. The dog," Navarro cut in, "is a legally recognized service animal accompanying a U.S. military veteran. Tampering with the dog, its equipment, or its owner's housing rights is punishable by federal law." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Navarro stared at the screen. "We are also reviewing whether any board actions were coordinated with the intent to intimidate or coerce the resident into vacating their home. If so, additional charges will apply." Silence. Navarro continued. "Effective immediately, any further contact, notices, or harassment directed at Mr. Walker or his service dog will be considered obstruction of a federal investigation." Karen sat down. For the first time, she looked small. Later that night, I found a note slipped under my front door. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten, sloppy, angry. "You think you're safe behind your dog and your little badge friends? You won't win. I own this neighborhood." It wasn't signed, but I need a name. The handwriting matched the HOA warning I kept from 2 months ago. Karen was spiraling. Cornered animals do desperate things. But I wasn't running anymore. I installed new security cameras. High resolution. Full view of my property, front and back. A silent alarm system. Bear never left my side. And Agent Navarro's team? They were preparing for what came next. Because what Karen didn't know, what she had never bothered to learn, was that crossing the line with a federally protected service dog isn't just a social faux pas. It's a felony. Karen couldn't stay silent for long. After the federal warning at the HOA meeting, most would have retreated, maybe lawyered up, gone silent until it all blew over. Not her. She doubled down. 3 days after Agent Navarro's appearance, a fresh HOA citation arrived taped to my front door like a final act of defiance. It accused me of emotional disturbance via animal howling, citing a fabricated complaint about Bear barking at 2 a.m. on a weekday. It was laughable, except no one was laughing anymore. I called Marissa, read it to her over the phone. She didn't even let me finish before cutting in. Good. Let her keep digging. There was a quiet intensity in her voice, the kind that suggested gears were already turning behind the scenes. Did she post a notice herself? Yes. Perfect. What Karen didn't know was that I had filed for a protective injunction just a week before. With the DOJ's investigation active and her continued harassment documented, the judge signed it without hesitation. So that taped notice? Violation number 1. The footage from my porch camera showed her approaching in broad daylight, checking to see if anyone was watching. She carried the folded paper like it was a secret weapon, her last little jab before the walls closed in. She had no idea that surveillance footage was already in the hands of the DOJ. No idea that Agent Navarro had quietly placed 2 unmarked cars in the neighborhood to monitor for retaliation. Karen's downfall wasn't that she was cruel. It was that she was predictable. That weekend, the neighborhood hosted its annual block party. HOA funded, of course. Karen's pride and joy. I almost didn't go, but something told me to show up if only so she'd know I wasn't hiding. I walked in with Bear at my side, vest secured and gleaming in the sun. Kids came up to pet him, and I allowed it. Bear wagged, tail high, posture alert. Karen stood by the grill, spatula in hand, lips tight. When she saw us, her face went stiff, but she didn't approach. She couldn't. Instead, she whispered something to Jeff, one of her most loyal board members. He glanced at me, nodded, and disappeared behind a row of tents. A few minutes later, the music glitched, then stopped. The MC tapped the mic, and the speakers crackled to life. Hey, everyone, quick announcement. Just a reminder that all animals in common areas must be leashed and approved. Let's be respectful of those with allergies. A beat of silence. I stood tall. Bear remained calm. The vest clearly labeled him as a service animal in large, visible print. People started murmuring. Someone called out, "He's a vet. That's his service dog." Another voice added, "Didn't you get in trouble for this already, Karen?" She pretended not to hear. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I just turned and walked Bear right up to the mic. Then I pulled out my phone, tapped it once, and held it up to the speaker. A recorded message played aloud, Agent Navarro's voice. Any interference with Mr. Walker's service dog or access to public and communal spaces will be considered obstruction of federal investigation and may result in criminal prosecution. The silence was thunderous. Karen's spatula clattered to the pavement. Later that night, the final nail was driven in. Bear and I were walking our usual route, looping past the back of the HOA office building. It was quiet, stars overhead, crickets humming in the bushes, until Bear stopped, hackles raised, body rigid. I followed his gaze and saw a figure crouched behind the HOA office fence. Karen. She held a small container in one hand and a shredded cloth in the other. Bear growled, low and menacing. I pulled out my phone, recorded. She was sprinkling something, powdered, along the grass line where dogs usually walked. Then she set the cloth down. It was stained, red, meat. I didn't say a word. I just filmed every single frame. By morning, I had turned over footage to Agent Navarro. She didn't respond with legalese. She responded with handcuffs. Within 48 hours, federal agents, escorted by local police, arrived at Karen's door. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. Half the neighborhood filmed it. Her voice screamed across the street. "This is insane. I didn't do anything. This is my neighborhood. That dog is a menace." The officers didn't flinch. They read of the charges clearly and calmly. Violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Harassment of a person with a disability. Tampering with federally protected service animal equipment. Attempted poisoning of a service animal. Obstruction of justice. 5 counts. All federal. The news spread like wildfire. By sundown, Karen's house was quiet. Her porch barren. Her flag removed. At the next HOA meeting, a replacement president was voted in. Tom, the accountant who had walked out earlier, stepped up, visibly shaken but committed to doing the right thing. "I want to apologize," he began, looking directly at me, "for enabling this, for staying silent when I should have stood up." I nodded once. That was enough. Marissa appeared on Zoom again. So did Agent Navarro, offering one final message. The Department of Justice will continue monitoring this HOA. Let this be a reminder. No one, not even an HOA board, is above the law. Karen's trial date was set for the following month. Her lawyers tried to negotiate, but the DOJ wasn't interested in deals. The charge that carried the most weight? Attempted harm of a federally protected service animal. A felony punishable by up to 10 years in federal prison. She was denied bail. When the dust settled, my mailbox stayed empty. No notices, no threats, no fines, just silence. And Bear, he still walks beside me, chest out, head high, guardian, companion, hero. But now, when neighbors see us pass, they don't look away. They wave. The trial was held on a Tuesday, and though I wasn't required to be there, I sat in the second row, right behind the prosecution, Bear resting quietly at my feet. Karen didn't look at me. She sat stiffly, flanked by her lawyers, her signature pearls replaced by a plain suit too large for her shoulders. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced with a cold, hollow stare of someone watching the foundation of her life crumble. When the charges were read aloud, the courtroom was still. Violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Harassment and intimidation of a disabled person. Tampering with service animal equipment. Attempted animal endangerment. Obstruction of a federal investigation. 5 counts, each carrying weight. Together, they form a chain she couldn't break. The prosecution played the footage, the park, the food, the vest nailed to my railing. And finally, the night she sprinkled what turned out to be rat poison behind the HOA office. Karen visibly winced when the chemical analysis report was read aloud. There was no hiding behind intent anymore. She didn't just cross the line. She set it on fire and danced on the ashes. When I was called to the stand, the room went quiet. I didn't want to relive it, but I owed it to Bear, to others who might have been in my place without the tools to fight back. I spoke clearly, calmly, no rage, just facts. I served 2 tours. I didn't come home the same man who left. Bear is not just a dog. He's the reason I sleep, the reason I can walk into a grocery store without panic clawing at my throat. I paused. Karen didn't just target me. She attacked the only piece of normalcy I had, all because she thought she was above the law. There was a murmur in the back of the court. One of the jurors blinked hard, eyes glassy. I finished with one sentence. I fought for this country. I never thought the fight would follow me home. The jury didn't deliberate long. Guilty on all counts. The judge didn't hold back during sentencing. Your position as HOA president was one of authority and influence. You use it not for order, but for cruelty. You weaponize policy to pursue a personal vendetta, and you endangered a service animal, a protected lifeline for a disabled veteran. That is unconscionable. Karen was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. No parole for the first 5. There was no gasp, no outburst, just silence, the kind that follows after a long, bitter storm finally ends. After the trial, people came up to me, neighbors I hadn't spoken to, a teenager from down the block who said his uncle had PTSD, and a dog just like Bear, an older woman in a motorized chair, who told me Karen had once yelled at her for blocking the sidewalk. They all said the same thing. I wish I had spoken up sooner. I nodded, because I understood. Fear has a way of silencing decent people. But once that fear is gone, courage finds its voice again. The HOA was restructured. Board members resigned, one after another. Tom stayed on, helping draft a new charter, one that explicitly protected residents with disabilities and restricted any single person from having unchecked power. Marissa? She sent me a bottle of champagne and a note that read, "Justice served. Take a breath now." Agent Navarro called me once more. "You did well," she said. "We don't always get to see it through like this." I asked what would happen to Karen beyond prison. She'll be barred from holding any leadership position in housing or public governance, and there may be civil suits if others come forward. She paused. "You started a wave, Mr. Walker. More people are watching now." Weeks passed. The silence was strange at first. Peace isn't something you notice. It's the absence of noise, of fear, of constant watching. Bear sensed it, too. He was lighter on his feet. He wagged more, slept easier. One evening, I sat on the porch with beer in hand and watched the sunset bleed into gold and lavender. For the first time in months, I wasn't scanning the street for threats. A group of kids rode their bikes past my lawn. One slowed, pointed at Bear and waved, "Hi, Sergeant Bear." I smiled. He'd earned the rank. A local journalist wrote a story about it all. The HOA that went too far. It made the rounds online. Comments poured in, some from vets, others from people with disabilities, thanking me for standing up. But the truth is, I didn't want to be a symbol. I just wanted to be left alone. Still, if speaking up meant someone else would be spared what I went through, it was worth it. One morning, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. Tight, precise, tense. It was from Karen. The letter was short. You ruined my life. I hope you're happy. But I finally see the dog was never a problem. There was no apology. No real remorse. But there was something else. Defeat. And that was enough. Today, Bear and I still take our walks. We still pass the HOA office, now repurposed as a community resource center with ADA-compliant signage and disability education pamphlets inside. Sometimes people stop us, ask questions, take pictures with Bear. He doesn't mind. He knows he's not just my lifeline anymore. He's a symbol. And in a neighborhood once ruled by fear, he's now a legend,